Hello, everyone. Welcome to We Are Wavemakers. You're with myself, Rachel, and my co host, Naz, and we are on episode 6 of our 7-part series of influencer marketing. And today's discussion is all about how to pick the right influencer on Instagram versus YouTube. IGTV has really been trying to ramp up its usage within the IG community. And earlier this year, Instagram has added this feature where IGTV clips would start appearing in people's feeds, which somewhat did intrigue people to watch more long form videos on IGTV. And as of recently, IGTV is getting another boost of exposure where users can now find a little tab of IGTV content through the Explore page. Did you guys know that?
No.
With that in mind, I suppose this gives our influencers to expand its content strategy towards IGTV and even possibly convert YouTubers that are on Instagram to use this feature. But I'm really curious to find out which channel has the better influencer, Naz, YouTube or Instagram?
That's a tough one, Rach. I can't even say they've got the same audience. I mean, there's definitely an overlap, but if you view the user behavior and audience persona of a person who converts through YouTube versus Instagram, you'll find that it's actually quite different.
Can you maybe tell us how it's different?
Well, for starters, YouTube has a higher male ratio versus Instagram because the women are more interested on Instagram versus YouTube. And that content wise, inside it, YouTube, you'll see more product reviews like the latest gadgets or like tutorials on how to put on your makeup or even how to cook a dish. I do that all the time. I mean, believe it or not, YouTube is actually the second highest search engine after Google itself. So it's only natural for someone like me to be using it.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that it's the most searched channel. It's pretty impressive. I guess we do
Second
take it
most.
second most. I guess we do take it for granted. And I totally understand to how people are more responsive to watching videos, especially when, it's just more engaging and dynamic.
Yep.
That being said, do you think IGTV content creators would stand a chance to grow as an extra platform on Instagram?
Realistically, unless they change their UX to be more like YouTube, I highly doubt it would put like similar traction. As it is, YouTube has recently introduced a feature similar to IG stories, so people can update their stories there too, like as though we need more. But to me, they have different types of audiences, so it's interesting to see how that impacts the length people stay on these respective platforms. Compared to Instagram, YouTube browsers are on the channel on average 45 minutes a day, whereas Instagram's average is about 15 minutes a day. Whether adding IGTV would really increase the browsing time, only time will tell.
Yeah, and that's a huge difference. I mean, 45 minutes and 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
With these insights, I do wonder if the type of content matters because I noticed that YouTube's content library is really vast compared to IGTV. And so, what kind of content do you think works for these respective channels?
Well, I think with YouTube, I noticed that tutorials and things like vlogging for travels and ASMR, it's a thing right now. Whereas on Instagram, I see it's a lot of feeding stuff that they have on YouTube, but a shorter version. So, for example, the dog whisperer, Caesar Milan, he's like my all time favorite. He uses IGTV to pull his community to watch more of his YouTube videos because his videos can only be 18 minutes long. And so his videos are generally like 30 minutes or more. So I see that what he does is he'll create a short snippet and be like, want to watch more? Watch it on my YouTube channel. So yeah, I think that's cool.
And people are actually having the patience to watch videos on dogs on
Yes,
IGTV.
you'll be surprised as I do it.
Okay, cool. I see that's what you're doing when you're not working, right?
Exactly.
Anyways, moving on. We really like to introduce our guests on today's episode. They are the founders, Daniel Woodruff and Brandon Lee from Pandan Social Agency, and they'll be sharing with us what they believe is considered to be good content that engages with these two very different platforms. So, welcome Daniel and Brandon on today's show.
Hey guys,
Hi,
thanks for
guys.
having us.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So let's ease things off a bit. I kind of want to know, how did you guys meet and why did you guys decide to create Pandan Social Digital Agency together? Tell us a bit more about that.
Who's gonna take this away? All right.
You can take
While I clear my voice. We actually have known each other for too long. And we know each other too
Okay.
well. We met go-karting. We were both race car drivers. So we started off in go-karts, and we've raced together for many years, and we moved through the ranks, ultimately with the goal of Formula One. But funding said otherwise. But it meant that we stayed in very close contact, and we've been very good friends since. But in terms of the actual business side of things, Brandon, has done a lot of freelance creative work, a lot of videography, whether it's through his own videos
Yeah.
or videos for other clients. And I'll let you go into more detail about that. Myself, I do a lot of marketing consultancy around the world with a lot of consulting groups. Not a lot of consulting groups, the one consulting group. But it means that we have a lot of penetration in international markets, but I've always noticed that there's been a kind of need for social media marketing. A lot of big companies still don't have dedicated teams to manage, run, and create content for social media platforms, even though everybody can agree that every company needs an active social media presence. And we kind of just came in to fill that gap. We have the team of creatives who can help you create that content. We have a team of account managers that can help you manage your pages if you supply the content. And that's really what we're trying to do at the moment. We're trying to make social media better for all of our clients.
Okay, that's really interesting. I can't wait to dive into this whole content discussion. So let's get straight into today's topic, right? Advantage and disadvantage of working on a campaign that is catered to Instagram versus YouTube. I would love to get your input on both channels, seeing as to how you guys work a lot with content. So could you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, I think the first thing that I want to kind of say at the beginning is that I believe that the best strategies and the best campaigns are always over multiple channels. I always think you shouldn't focus on one. You have an entire digital marketing ecosystem, and we always get this question when we have clients asking us to manage their pages. They're like, let's just do Facebook, or just take our Instagram and our Facebook, without understanding that it is an ecosystem. If you want to have that digital footprint, you have to have a presence in all areas. There isn't there isn't one solution for all. And as I'm sure we're going to discuss, and as you guys did discuss earlier in this podcast, each platform has different audiences, different pros and cons. So there isn't a winner for everyone. To win, you have to do
Right.
all. So I mean, with YouTube for sure, Brandon's the kind of guy for that. But YouTube lets you do more detailed long form content. Instagram's more aesthetic, very quick, disappears very quickly.
Do you guys think, with YouTube, I'm a huge fan of watching YouTube content as a whole, just because there's more aesthetics to be seen versus, say, as a video for video creators. I feel YouTube has a lot more interesting ways of engaging with the audience, whereas IGTV is still in its infancy stage. It tried to be cool by doing it like in, what is it, horizontal, sorry,
Vertical.
not horizontal, they only
Vertical.
just vertical, no, they just introduced horizontal like literally in this past month. But before this, it was only vertical, and for me that was a limitation on the platform as a whole. It looked amazing in perspective, but as a video editor, I can only imagine that's difficult. I mean, Brandon, would you agree?
I think in terms of perspective, I think there was a lot of like hoo-ha about what went down when they introduced the vertical aspect. But I think a lot of creators actually did it quite well. I found that on YouTube, for sure, the landscape perspective is always very nice to look at when you're doing cinematics. For vertical, it's a little bit harder because it's so up close. But what I found was really good was for people, because people are usually upright. So for influencers, when they did travel videos or talking videos or even like podcast videos, I found that IGTV was okay with the vertical. And I mean, even then, if you wanted to do horizontal, you could always just flip it to the side. So um, for me personally, it wasn't too big of an issue. I do like both. I think both serve very different purposes. So in terms of aspect, not too big of a deal, to be honest.
And you think about like the accessibility as well
Yeah.
for content creators. I mean, when you're filming, you know, a selfie, your phone's upright like that, right? So it's only natural. It's so much easier to edit videos when everything's already in that kind of perspective. Yeah.
I find that when we work with creatives like yourselves, it's really easy to seamlessly enter into these platforms. But would you guys agree that trying to educate this to your clients, for example, would be a little bit of a challenge?
Yeah, for sure. I think I think it's just as simple as educating them on differences and the different uses between platforms is already a challenge in itself. So I think to kind of explain into depth with the different aspects, and even for example, putting up a square dimension for a video or a picture on Instagram compared to a landscape for LinkedIn or Facebook, it's already something that we need to explain. So what more video in full vertical screen and landscape. So
yeah. And that you're just talking about dimensions there. I mean,
Yeah.
like the actual way you convey your content on both brands is extremely different. So to explain that to a client as well, and we do find a lot of clients are already quite averse to using social media. It just makes it even harder.
Yeah.
Okay, that being said, when it comes to campaign messaging, how do you decide on which type of content or format works best for your clients?
I feel like that there's so many variables involved. Age for sure. Who your demographic is, what their kind of gender distribution is. I mean, you were saying there was a higher male uptake on YouTube, versus females. So these are all the different things you have to take into consideration. What is the product you're trying to sell? I mean, if it's clothes, if it's something lifestyle oriented, sure, Instagram's going to work because first of all, it's a pretty thing and you want to showcase how pretty it is. So you use the platform that's designed to showcase pretty things. And also if it's an e-commerce brand, you want to go to Instagram because there's immediate click-through. And I mean, Brandon has his own sportswear brand as well, Modern Vision, and a huge amount of their sales come through Instagram or Facebook because of the integrations for e-commerce that's native to that platform. Not quite the same for YouTube. You have to see what kind of stage you're at in the product life cycle as well. Does everybody know your brand and you're just trying to get people to purchase? Or are you trying to educate the consumer? I mean, if you're trying to educate the consumer on something like food, then maybe YouTube is the way to go because you can get more in-depth and relate to people a bit more.
So it's sort of like an audience analysis and also like looking into the product or service that they're trying to offer before deciding like, yeah, Brandon, you were saying?
No, so just in like, just to summarize, it's kind of like reverse engineering what kind of demographics you're looking for. And then from there, you just kind of create the content for it. I think in any marketing campaign, that's what we do.
Backwards.
Yeah, for sure. Always looking backwards. Because, I mean, you can create the craziest video, but if your demographic is, 50 to 60-year-old men, you're not going to sell by creating an aesthetically pleasing video almost, So I think reverse engineering your demographics was the most important thing.
Yeah.
Let's talk about influencers. Like, what are the key criteria that any influencer should think of when it comes to creating content on YouTube versus Instagram? And I guess this would be sort of like a piece of advice from you guys being like content creators for any influencer out there who's struggling to create content and keeping up with technology.
I hate to do this, but I'm going to quote Gary Vee.
Do it.
And
I like Gary Vee.
You just need to be, I do like Gary Vee. I do. Guilty pleasure of mine. But, be yourself. If you really are going to be an effective content creator, it needs to be consistent. And if you're faking who you are, you have this kind of idolized image of what an influencer is, you're not going to be an effective one because people can tell when you're faking it. And by that very same kind of point, I personally hate the hard sell. I hate it to death. And I've been involved personally in campaigns where I have done hard sells before. And that I will admit, sometimes can be down to absolute laziness. But I find that when I see products on my feed, and it's just this very blatant, hard sell, and I know that you're getting pushed to me these products, and you're talking about how amazing it is, and I'm like, I know you personally, and this is the fakest thing I've ever seen. I carry those same emotions to the brand. So content creators need to understand the potential damage they can do as well when it's just kind of over the top.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, like, think about, do you guys know Casey Neistat, David Dobrik, these YouTubers? You familiar with them?
Yep.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yep. Okay. So, I mean, think about them and the way they do product placements. David Dobrik is a prime example with SeatGeek, right? Always buying cars for his friends, always buying cars for his family members. The way he does it is it's very pluggy, but because he's so known for being this type of like crazy guy who does all these crazy things with his friends, it works.
Mhm.
So I think matching the way you plug something with the authenticity of your own personal brand is like the most important thing.
Totally. I think that's very important.
I get what you mean because, for example, like I see in YouTube, for the vloggers are a lot more in your face with the way they promote a product. Whereas on Instagram, I find that it can still be quite subtle, visually, and the way they communicate it. So I'm not sure if that's going to impact my perception if I saw, say, I was talking about Cesar Milan earlier, right? And the thing about them is, for example, on his YouTube platform, he obviously promotes products as well, but he's not as in your face. But maybe it's also because he's already a brand, right? But for any budding influencer, it's about finding that balance of how do you keep yourself not so fake, and as Daniel is saying, just be themselves. How do they be themselves? And I think one of the challenges I find is because the functionality of the platforms they differ. The influencer definitely has to be a bit more creative with, if they have both channels, if they have YouTube and they have Instagram, they've got to be more creative with the different audiences, as we mentioned earlier. Yeah.
For sure.
And I think also being confident with their personal brand, like you said, I mean, if they don't have clarity in that aspect, then the foundation itself is flaw in whatever they're trying to do. So really good points, guys. All right, moving on. Let's talk about viral content. What's the most memorable viral content that you remember on, say, Instagram or YouTube? And do you think that there is a different reaction when it comes to both channels?
I think the reaction is the same. I feel that for content to go viral online, you have to play into two human emotions. It's either humor or sadness. The two most powerful ends of either spectrum. And I think, I mean, we were discussing before this, what are our favorite viral campaigns, and they always fall into either side. You look at the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge, humorous. You look at the Instagram egg.
Yeah.
Completely random, made no sense, humorous. You look at the sadder side of things, you have, ironically, it turned out to be quite funny because it was a bit of a scam. Coney 2012, right? That was a viral YouTube campaign, but that played into people's emotions. And I remember how effective that was. I always say Coney 2012 and people laugh, but I remember when it came out, I was still in school. We paused classes to watch the videos. Everybody was buying action kits. It was all over social media. People were sharing. The stickers were going around KL on lampposts and walls. And this is in KL, talking about some guy and some militant leader in Africa, and suddenly everybody's up in arms. So I think the reaction is the same. The way you convey it needs to vary from platform to platform. On YouTube, again with Coney 2012, that was a 30-minute video. But if you break down how they did it, in the first 3 minutes, they already hooked you with your human emotion, right? They showed videos of kids and families and people playing around, and you connected. On Instagram, funny things are easily shared, and that's how it became viral. What about you?
Yeah, I think just to add on a point before I go into my top favorites, I think both, whether it's IG or YouTube, they both play on human emotion. So for example, like a turtle getting a straw stuck in its nose, right? That's gone crazy.
That's
And it's short.
sad. I still remember
Yeah,
that.
right. And it's not. It doesn't have to be too long. It could be spliced up into under 1 minute on IG, and it would still go viral if it was shared by the right platforms. So I think content can be always shifted into different platforms, but I think that what remains the same is the emotions that plays on the viewer. Yeah. So for me, I think it falls into the same category, humorous. I don't know if you're familiar with Aviation Gin by Ryan Reynolds.
Okay.
He did an ad, and if you don't know this, go search it up after this. He did an ad with
Hugh Jackman.
Hugh Jackman. Yeah. And it was just the funniest thing. So yeah,
Okay.
search that one on YouTube. It's good.
Gotcha.
I don't know if you guys, and this is again, it goes back to targeting and demographics. I'm not sure if you guys have seen the SK2 campaign that this Japanese, what's her name? The comedian, she's and James, James Corden. So they've been,
Oh,
I don't know how they've decided to engage in two comedians. Usually SK2, if you guys don't know, is a beauty
Yeah.
product. And they decided to engage in James Corden and this Japanese comedian, I forgot her name for the life of me, but the idea was they use humor instead of buy this beautiful product as a campaign, knowing the fact that they are influential in the comedy scene, but at the same time trying to combine that whole concept of, yes, beauty is also skin deep, yet use our beauty products. So I found that to be very interesting because campaigns like that make you wonder, like, what are they trying to appeal in terms of emotion? And you guys mentioned humor. And using James Corden in a beauty product for me was strange, but funny, very funny. You guys should check that out too. So thanks for sharing your content. We're definitely going to
But
check
it's
that
also
out
just
too.
just to add on a little bit. It's also the crossover between different industries. I think is something that a lot of creators are
Yeah.
doing nowadays. Like for example, music. You would never think like
Yeah.
rap and country would mix, but yet Billy Ray Cyrus and Lil Nas is doing a remix together, doing a song together.
Yeah.
And I think that's quite a smart move because you grab different audiences and you kind of mix it into one big one. And I think that's what SK2 is also trying to do with that.
Yeah, and they're trying to be like the first movers, right? I mean, it again with social media, as soon as one idea becomes viral, everybody does the exact same thing, right? You look at Daniel Wellington, kind of, sometimes dubbed the pioneer of influencer marketing. And, that was their only marketing avenue. And they blew up. And then within a year, you had all these other watch brands, same price point, literally identical product, same campaign. You get all your friends and micro influencers suddenly getting, discount codes because it worked. So for bigger brands now to stand out, I think exactly like you were saying, they really have to change the game, and you really have to. I mean, like SK2.
Yeah, mix it up.
Who on earth would have thought that comedy would have worked? But then you look at other kind of, I wouldn't call it a beauty product, but Old Spice. I personally don't like the smell of Old Spice deodorant that much, but I literally bought it just because I wanted to be able to be like, look at your man, back at me, look at your man. I'm on a horse. It works. It's so silly. You feel silly for doing it. But you're like, they took my money, so
Yeah.
paid off.
So it's all about groundbreaking, absurd ideas, pretty much, just sort of like to grab people's attention
exactly.
these days.
Yeah, and if you're in the creative world, you kind of have to get
For
creative,
sure.
right?
Sure.
With your ideas.
All right. Okay, so Brandon, this one's for you. Like being a videographer and a total visual guy, how do you make content less promotional for your clients? We were speaking a little bit about that, and I'm pretty sure a lot of influencers would want to know this. Like, how do you not hard sell? How do you, what's your approach? Tell us.
So I think as a videographer, we need to like make sure that we need to keep in trend, right? So we need to make sure what's the type of visuals that are going around now, what's the type of videos that a certain demographics like. For example, like, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Sam Calder. I'm using him as an example because he created a style of video that was very different at the point of time. And even now, you see a lot of creators trying to emulate him. And from there, a lot of travel videos on Instagram are sort of like skewed towards his type of style with the heavy color grading and the crazy transitions. And because of that, people like it. People like it, and everyone started emulating it. And so a lot of travel videos or travel companies started hiring these types of influencers or videographers to do that style of videos. So I think first and foremost, having insight into what kind of trends, what kind of visual trends are happening is very, very important. But also looking at the type of product. I think the way you would film bubble tea, for example, would be very different from the way you would, from the way you film a steakhouse, or you would film a, like I said, travel video. So I think, making sure that the way you film it is in a way that portrays a story. I think because Instagram's so short nowadays, like people want to film very, very short clips, but sometimes they don't make enough sense.
Yeah.
So it's very visually attractive.
Right.
Great videography, but it just doesn't tell a story. That, in my opinion, is great videography, but bad marketing. I think videos that do very well are videos that always tell a story. And I think that's the most important part of videography.
Some good tips.
You mentioned earlier something about trends in videography, and I noticed a lot of videos use drones these days to shoot everything. And what are your thoughts on that? Do you think they're overusing it? Sometimes I feel I want to kind of see things up close.
For sure. I think everything can be overused. Like Sam called a style video, right? Everyone's emulating it. It's becoming so saturated to the point where every time I see someone try to copy it, I'm like, skip. Just because,
Cringe.
right? Just because. And drones is no exception. Like I said, I think back to the point of storytelling. Every shot needs to have a purpose, not just throwing in a beautiful sunset drone island shot for no reason when you're trying to sell something else. So I think storytelling is the most important thing. Using the shots purposefully in that time frame that you have to capture the audience, because it's very funny, right? When you think about videos, like it could be 30 seconds and it could be the most attractive thing in the world, but it also could be 3 minutes and it still keeps your attention. So I think using, length to a certain extent doesn't matter as much as what kind of story you want to tell and how you're telling it.
Okay, those are some really good tips. Well, speaking of editing, what are your top 3 favorite tools to edit videos for, say, Instagram and YouTube? And this one's just for our listeners.
I'm a Final Cut Pro user. So whoever's using Premiere Pro or anything else, don't hate me. But I use Final Cut Pro for everything.
Okay.
I use Final Cut Pro for everything, even IG stories, like just because I prefer it. I know there's a lot of apps nowadays that you can use, which is honestly way easier
tons.
And like takes 30 seconds to do, but I prefer to like have control over every little thing that we do.
Traditionalist.
Not traditionalist, just I like the feel of like controlling everything, not just simply splicing stuff together. Yeah, but that's just me.
Cool. Daniel, are you using any tools on your end?
Yeah, his name's Brandon Lee.
Brandon Lee's your tool. The perfectionist next to you. Gotcha.
Nice. Branding. Good branding.
Good answer.
But it's true.
It is true.
All right, cool. All right, this one's for you, Daniel. Being a TV host and spokesperson for some brands before, I'm sure you've worked with a lot of content creation, specifically for social media campaigns. Could you tell us what makes content engaging, and what are some of the aspects you look into to determine this?
So I have worked with a lot of brands, but I will say I admit that I haven't done it very well. And I'll say that because I know what I want the content to be. And it's exactly as we were discussing before, it needs to tell a story. I said earlier on in this podcast, I don't like the hard sell, and I'm 100% guilty of going for the hard sell sometimes. And that's completely on me. But I think what makes content the most engaging is when you're telling a story and your story is your brand. I mean, if you're talking about an individual influencer, your timeline is your life, right? you're documenting snapshots in your life. So all of a sudden, when you're, on holiday in Bali, and then you're traveling to the US for business, and you're doing all this kind of stuff, and then suddenly there's a really hard sell watch photo, people who've been following you for, even 3 months going to go like, oh, yeah, that it's a hard sell, it's an ad, skip. So
Right.
how you make content engaging is having it integrate into your life, into your feed. And by doing that, maybe a message for content creators out there is work with brands who you would actually want to buy from, just because you have
Agreed.
I mean, the rise of micro influencers is there. So we're seeing a lot of people, even with 2,000 followers, getting requests to be ambassadors or part of campaigns, which is great. But a lot of the time, these people get so excited that they're being contacted by a brand that they do anything and everything. So I think to have engaging content, you have to have things that you'd actually use. You have to be selective, and of course, the content has to be tailored to the platform. If it's Instagram, you can do it a lot more passively. Take a nice, pretty photo, and if you have a backpack, it just so happens to be in your bag on your back. But if it's YouTube, my favorite's travel vlogs. That's when you can really showcase products and just slide it in there without being too much of a hard sell. And I find that the travel vlogs are actually ones where you can do the most hard sell without it coming across that way, because people are following your story on the actual journey, right? I mean, the whole trip could be sponsored by AirAsia and you could be plugging it the whole way, but people are like, oh no, this isn't a hard sell because I'm actually going on holiday with you, and they just completely forget about it. So yeah, I think those are the things to keep in mind.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we've been obviously speaking to influencers and brands and all kinds of people, and since this entire season. And one thing is for sure, the whole integrating brands with their customers, or calling their customers their influencers, is a lot more powerful than, say, engaging someone who has no idea what your product is about and is just trying it out for their first time, because then they'll be miseducated about it, or they wouldn't even know how to respond if people ask them about the product. And we've seen that happen. And I think it's so important for brands to recognize that aspect as well. And for an influencer to just completely recognize, hey, if I'm not really into that product, should I really say yes? And you're right, Daniel, micro influencers are the ones they jump the gun for it. And I think as an agency, we've been spending a lot of time trying to curate the right influencer for our clients, whether it's micro or macro, just because it's a waste of the client's time and also the influencer's time and our time if we just work with influencers that are whoever. Do you know what I mean?
For sure. Completely agree.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I think we've come to the end of our questions, and we've gained a lot of insights from the both of you. So thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Really, really good chat.
Any last takeaway to share with us before we wrap up?
Follow us on Instagram at Pandan Social. And,
no plugging in.
Do it.
On the topic of the hard sell. No, but seriously, yeah,
All right.
I love what you guys do. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. Thank you for being on the show with us.
Got a lot of cool insights. Really excited. Well, Nas, that was very interesting speaking to Brandon and Daniel from Pandan Social Digital Agency. What did you think about their insights between Instagram and YouTube? What was your favorite?
I think I really like that they actually cared about the whole audience thing. I mean, we talk about this all the time as an agency as well, and how we mention to our clients who is your target audience.
Yeah.
And that's all the fundamental of it, honestly, because when it comes to content, without knowing the audience, there's no point in talking about it.
Yep.
You know?
And it's interesting to have it from a creative perspective, where Brandon says it's important to work backwards regardless of your channel. And I also like that they brought up the fact that the product or service is important. It's almost like the basics of marketing, like the product placement.
I also found that it was really good that they mentioned this whole trends in content.
Yeah.
And how it doesn't mean, yes, you should stay in touch and know what is out there. But it also varies, depends on the product. Just because there's your product, it doesn't mean you need a drone shot, for example. You could do other things and be creative about it. But oftentimes, if we follow the trend too much, it becomes saturated.
And that's exactly what's happening in the world of social media these days. There's just a lot of repetition in terms of content. And so it's almost like it's important to have a breakthrough or to be absurd at all times, just because otherwise things will be the same over and over,
It makes you wonder about campaigns like the Pepsi campaign, for example, where Kendall Jenner was called out for that. I found that, I did ask myself, why did Pepsi do something silly like that? I mean, surely they must have thought about this. And, we talked about absurdity. Did they do this just to generate this conversation that we're having right now? We just gave a free brand mention.
It's almost like confusing, And so it is trickier these days with an abundance of content. What did you think about like their approach when it comes to content creation? Did you find any useful tips for us that we could use as an agency?
Well, content creation wise, they definitely did talk about, say, the tools that they used. I do think he mentioned Final Cut Pro, right? And I agree with him. Even for me, I don't dabble too much into video editing, but I do know that there's a difference between editing from an app, say, versus from something as professional as that platform. So I think it's really important to hire quality when it comes to your campaign, especially if it's important to your brand. So for me, it's all about that quality, not just whatever.
Definitely quality regardless of the channel that you're going to engage in. And
Agreed.
That being said, like, what do you think about this whole influencer thing? Like how can they keep up with an ever-changing platform? And it's just like you said, content is getting so saturated. Like, how do we empower these influencers to get better at what they're doing?
I think what I would do if I was an influencer is to be more open to collaboration. With other not brands, more with other people, their peers, essentially, to basically come up with a creative idea together as a collective. I think we talked about this whole collective thing instead of just being about me, you know. And I find that influencers that just go on the me route, they have it harder to build a brand. And they, if they want to become Gary V, they've got to invest a lot in their content. They've got to invest a lot in their networking. And even someone like, say, Jane Chuck, she's already a brand. People already know her as a brand, and she can pretty much do whatever creative work that she wants to do, and brands already know her because she's a name. But for any budding micro influencer, you can't just do that. And so I would say leverage on collectives. So work with a group of people to create content together. It's a lot more fun as well, I find, So
That's really good advice. That being said, I think we're at the end of today's episode.
Yep. And with that, that's a wrap up for today's episode. So thank you to our listeners for listening in for today. We hope that you have gained some insights from the agency experts, Daniel and Brandon. And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast. We'll be having another episode in a couple of weeks. It's our final episode. I'm really excited because it is a reflection piece of me and Rachel, where we'll be discussing what's going to happen in the next months to come before 2020.
That is crazy if you think about it. And so I can't wait for a little reflection piece. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. My name is Rachel, together with my co-host Nadzira. This is a podcast brought to you by Wavemakers, an integrated marketing communications agency, recording live from the Island of Gods, Bali.